Good evening, everyone. Hi, welcome to day 63. Of course, before we get started, today's t-shirt. Yes, I have been on a run of Has Been Hotel. I like the show. And today I have Lucifer with a giant picture of him wielding all his ducks, and it says, "Take that depression." Not actually depressed at the moment, so it just was entertaining more than anything else. Okay. Today was, as always, interesting, and it was a combination of reinforcing some stuff, investigating some stuff, and a couple of strange accidental discoveries. Started this morning with Be Prepared, and the first take had a really strong response right after I walked out of it. Right after I finished singing, I just said, "Oh my God, that felt good." It wasn't the dopamine rush, but it definitely felt like I had done something right. A whole bunch of the different little character changes that I've come up with that depart from Jeff's version of this all seem to manifest during the take. And everything started just showing up. Now, also, a lot of the bass notes manifested despite this morning not actually being a bass. But that was the way it was. For the first time in a while, the octave change felt legitimately close to the intended coordination instead of simply surviving the region and escaping with my life. But that's solved. Still tension, there's still pushing and reaching, a little effort involved. But after the first take, I actually walked away thinking I did something. It's worth considering that I got somewhere. And that's significant because the biggest mistake that I had during that take wasn't actually a singing mistake. So immediately octave change and Be Prepared. It landed, and you come out of that, you immediately go into a Be Prepared. My brain noticed that I had just done the octave change and not horribly. And my brain started going, "How did you do that? How did you do that?" Which, of course, caused me to stop staying in the song. So the final entrance came in late, and of course the singer had delay of game called on it. How many penalties have I gotten for my song this game so far? Anyway, playback itself revealed a few mysteries. The first one was microphone related. For some reason, the vocals came back much quieter than I expected. I mean, to the point where the chorus sounded like the lead vocals and I sounded like the chorus, which is not typically how the arrangement is meant to be sounding. The second mystery involved that octave region itself. The notes are beginning to sort of get there, but they still feel less like opening up and letting them happen and more like a jump and a reach, like something on American Ninja Warrior. The distinction is becoming increasingly important because it doesn't really feel like a note availability problem anymore. It increasingly feels like a mechanics problem. So there was investigation that I did surrounding the line. Also, "Idiots, I'll be the king." Now, for some reason, on the playback, the entrance keeps sounding less like I'm late on the entrance and more like somebody actually edited the beginning of my voice off. So instead of getting an idiots, you get more of an it's. And I actually, in one take, sort of overlapped the entrance, and it still sounded cut off. So Apparently that phrase has now acquired its own active investigation file. Anyway, despite all of that, the overall conclusion from 194 remained very simple. It was a good take. It was a great take. Octave change accepting. So at that point I was a little dry, and I typically am in the morning. So I took a little bit of a drink, and then I went on to take 195. This one actually was less performative and more experimental. One of the biggest realizations that I had during the morning showed up. I'm beginning to be able to consciously make corrections without breaking everything else. This is huge, especially if you've been following along for this series. Historically, a lot of vocal work can feel like, okay, I touch this and everything else falls apart. But this morning, the system increasingly felt stable enough that I could make small adjustments without destabilizing everything else in the performance. And that honestly feels like a new phase of the process. I also started looking at the transition between the opening hums and the first melodic lines. The piece begins, hum, hum, hum. I know increasingly it feels like the hums are in one mindset, and the first set of lyrics that follow are a different mindset. And I think shifting from one to the other, it's not so much creating instability as it is sort of positioning everything to hit the right notes. Because the first and second lines always feel like there's a note just out of place. Okay, second time through, as always, I'm not trying to reproduce what happened the first time around. I am never trying to reproduce. But I was testing a few hypotheses. Because where's a better place for science than in the middle of singing Scar in a cappella? The microphone position that I use stayed fixed. When I start, because the hums are very internalized, I'm pretty much glued to the microphone with that So I stayed there. I stayed close to the microphone. So a lot of things, the entrance approach changed. I slightly tweaked some mechanics. And of course, you go to the playback and then you can hear the effect. Microphone distance definitely matters. My microphone is obviously one of those ones that if you are in a little dome right around it, you get the best reception, and it is hypercardioid enough. I think that's what it was. It's been a long time since I've remembered microphone terminology. But if you get, a couple inches away, microphone gets much, much weaker. The bass notes are continuing to come out more. And those newer theatrical choices that I've been bubbling around with, they came right back. The octave change this time around, the second time was weaker. But by that point, the whole framing that I feel about this octave change, it's not notes, it's mechanics, it's understanding how to position everything to make it work. Those notes are increasingly they're showing up. They are available, and the question isn't can I do it. The question is what is the correct mechanism for accessing it consistently. And I think that's a better question. Okay. Later on in the afternoon, the Boulevard session produced a surprise. Now, before I even started the session, I ran through Boulevard. And not just the part I'm practicing, the entire song. And I have to say, for the first time, everything felt easy. Everything felt open, natural. The notes were right where they were supposed to be. And the chorus, I wasn't even thinking about. Nothing was being reached for, just sailed through those notes. It was simply there. Of course, this was no surprise because I had sung the entire thing an octave lower. That's where my bass happened to be when I went into Boulevard. So, what was interesting, however, was discovering just how open the bottom end of my voice was. To put it in simple melodic terms, the section 2, I walk up, that is about an F2, and I was dropping everything in octaves. Or grew up, it's less so now, but I drop, I don't know, I don't know if I got the F1 still, but it was there, and I was very pleased with it. But obviously, the song is not sung down an octave. But I did decide to actually, during session, record the piece with the octave down, just to feel what it's like. Now, when I was recording it, something different happened. And halfway through that lower section, section 2, the voice seemed to start shifting and adjusting on its own. By the time I got to the chorus, I was in the right octave. I had naturally migrated back into the proper octave. However, very nicely, the chorus still arrived very cleanly. That was not how I expected that recording of the low voice to actually end. So did proper takes. The first one that I did that was with intent, the correct octave after my experiment, I can only describe as weird, but weird in an encouraging way. Section 2 felt rock solid. When I hit the chorus, the first 2 F4s were effortless. Something in my mind must have gone, hey, that was effortless. We need to panic now, because what's singing without anxiety? And the second 2 F4s kind of flatted a bit down to probably as far as E4. They were definitely flat. The second line completely got away from me. But that didn't drive things off kilter. And somehow section 4, our mysterious little brother, is holding together better than usual. So things are improving. Section 4 increasingly feels like it is assembling itself rather than merely surviving. Once I got out of the weird take, I did 113, and I started to incorporate some of that recent advice that came from the vocal coach, which specifically was trying to read the lines more naturally instead of simply singing through them. Honestly, that continues to feel like the right direction. However, sustains and changes in notes sometimes go against the natural flow of a sentence. My vocal color never really arrived in the upper octave. I could hear on the playback that it was trying to come out. And of course, when it's that kind of situation, I always fall back on the same analogy. It's time for a wrestling match. The stronger color was really trying to come out. It wasn't gone, but it was obviously pinned, and it could not push its way back into control. So everything was just simply negotiating. That'll be my word for today. One of the biggest realizations, of course, came back, and I talked about this a bit over the last day or two, lonely. I walk a lonely road. Because now that I know where that note is supposed to live, rather than where I thought, or more properly feared where it lived, it's just going there. I walk a lonely road. It's good, it's in, it's out, we're done. And that is a wonderfully different change from that older mindset. Second time through, the chorus got all its notes correct. Section 4 continues to assemble itself. But the big notation, after being deep bass for a while, was that the vocal color just wasn't coming. And after those 2 takes, I felt fine just comfortably stopping there. And it wasn't because of fatigue or being tired. I wasn't frustrated, but I had gathered a lot of good evaluative information, and that's, again, continuing to be a change in the thought process over this. I know that the goal is never forcing a result, but it is about understanding how things are working and understanding it well enough that the result is inevitable. It's not going to change much further with more takes. That way lies fixing or micro adjustments, and that's not how you want that to land. And that was pretty much it for my 2 sessions. But it was still an incredibly busy day, because before I wrap up, if you haven't seen it, today the file opened. I have a new series that's weekly called 58 Investigations. It is definitely more scripted, whereas here I consult from, for the most part, an outline. That one, because I'm really trying to formulate thoughts, I do write more of a paragraph from time to time. But the new series is diving into characters' heads for ideas on how to perform them. My first volume, The Vox Files, which focuses on the devious mind of hell's television-headed media overlord from the popular Amazon Prime adult animated series Has Been Hotel. And I opened today with a shorter pilot episode. It gives an idea of the kind of things I'm actually going to be focusing on in future weeks, and how I'm facing the series. It's about 10 minutes. It's worth a check, and any feedback would be great. But besides that, that's that. That's day 63. So, I don't know. Should I skip tomorrow? No. 64 is a nice round number. It's 2 to the something. So, yeah, definitely be back for 64. I hope you're back for 64. I hope more people are here for 64. But, you know, it's all about just learning and keeping the process going. So, while I continue to get the process going, I will say thank you, good night, and later.